Hello everybody, welcome to the patch 13.4 rundown for amateur play. My name is Quintic, and today I'll be using my system of predictive criteria to help me assess the probable impact of the patch on all levels of amateur competition, with a special focus on the underserved platinum and below. Please keep in mind that although every change will have an impact on solo queue win rate, systems updates and major champion updates are the only ones that should realistically have a significant strategy on your amateur strategy. It will make, a lot of these changes will make virtually no difference to players in IBS Gold, Platinum. We should be drafting around Comfort anyway. That's sort of the thing, right? If you're watching this roughly a week after release, be sure to check the comments below for any updates to my predictions. And if you are watching this on YouTube and it's a few days after the patch and you're like, oh no, my game was before you were able to post this video, I do record these live on Twitch, and I encourage you to check it out there if the edited video doesn't come out at a good time for you. So we are starting with Ahri. She is receiving 20 base health, she is receiving 3 base armor, and she is receiving a shorter cooldown on Spirit Rush. They're saying Ahri disappeared when her mains needed her most because she received some nerfs. She's struggling to keep up. Yeah, and her core item, which is Everfrost, is not very strong, right? Now, we're still assessing Everfrost after the 13.3 Tenacity updates, so it's possible that that, in combination with Ahri's direct buffs, is going to make her like a bit of a better champion. So here we go. Here's the difference in Ahri's HP. It is very linear, again, because it's all base increases, right? So it's like roughly, it's like plus 40 all levels, right? Plus 40 effective HP. We do now, I got some durability predictors wrong in the last patch, right? We should treat this, it's plus 40 durability effective HP in the early game, and on burst champions, plus 40 damage is a significant change in lethal windows early. So this is a meaningful increase in durability against physicals for Ahri. Only physicals. Now, is Ahri the type of champion who likes to cast ultimate on cooldown? Yes, she is, actually. She absolutely appreciates the safety that this brings her. She appreciates the playmaking opportunities. These are all nice changes. These are all good. But until I am certain that Everfrost is a meaningfully better item, I would not predict Ahri to be like so much stronger that you must immediately reintroduce her to your pools. Alistar. So yeah, Alistar did not receive the buffs that we had hoped for. I said that last patch, the passive healing doesn't translate to a significant increase in laning power, but it's a lot stronger later. So we wanted to start building Dark Seal, but I didn't really see new pick conditions. Now, some pro players have been messing around with like AP Alistar mid, AP Alistar top. I think it's kind of a meme, but I guess keep that on your radar. It is funny. Like, it might be kind of a Blitzcrank jungle situation, you know? So what happens? Ally heal of Triumphant Roar is now increased to 7% of Alistar's maximum health, so it's about equal to pre-patch teammate heal values, so they're like, oops, we accidentally nerfed Alistar's ally healing, I guess. Sure, that is a very valuable property, and that's kind of nice. And we will check this in the context of the support item that's coming up. Plus 10% AP, plus 10% AP. Okay, you're building Dark Seal every single game on Alistar. Without the context of the systemic change, I still wouldn't immediately jump to like new Alistar pick conditions, but I do think that Alistar is one of the better melee supports with like what state he's in, at least compared to Leona or something like that, right? So if we do end up seeing a major shift and melee supports are good and Alistar's good into melee supports, we probably do start to feel like Alistar is a better champion that we want to pick a lot more often. But in a vacuum, no. Amumu. So, Amumu is an incredibly strong jungler. The funny thing is, I just slept on him for such a long time. I thought, no goddamn way Amumu is actually like a meaningfully strong jungler. His clear was surely still kind of unhealthy, right? And to a degree it is, but you know, demonic champions, I slept on him. So, what's happening to him? Health growth, significant reduction. Armor growth, minus 0.2. Magic damage per tick is going down. It's just the ratio here. When you're maxing it, it's now minus 0.4% max health per tick. Amumu's W ticks every 0.5 seconds. So this is effectively a 0.8% max health DPS nerf. And that's around our 1% max health nerf, where we're like, yeah, okay, significant DPS loss. Amumu's losing nothing at early levels whatsoever in terms of durability because he's only losing growth statistics, so we'll check in at like his 11, which is like a minus 100 effective HP versus physicals. Now I have definitely been underrating certain durability changes. I need to refine my durability predictors. So in light of what we've seen over the last few patches, yeah, I would predict a minus 100 EHP nerf in the mid game to matter. 100 HP made so much of a difference in Sunfire's viability in top lane, right? So I guess by that metric, this matters. So yeah, as a jungler, you will consider him noticeably weaker. Now, is Amumu blatantly overpowered? And because I've been sleeping on him so long, I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question exactly, so this is going to be a decision for your individual team to make. Are you still going to run Amumu in the jungle? Do you value what Amumu brings in terms of raw CC highly enough? In Platinum and below, truthfully, I would lean towards yes. I think you do still value that a reasonable amount, and he is, compensating for his own damage a bit by just Demonic Rush. I wouldn't read too much into this as a support, although it will affect support Amumu to a degree. So yeah, we will see a meaningfully weaker jungle Amumu, but maybe we just consider jungle Amumu the last weirdo OP-ish territory, tank jungler from that whole demonic debacle. And in lower levels of play, we just value what the rest of his kit brings anyway. Anivia. They caught on. Okay, so Anivia was part of the unholy trinity of Ryze, Kassadin, and Anivia, and they hit Ryze, they hit Kassadin, but Anivia was the one who wasn't seeing pro play, who was just as broken as the others, who was using the same systems. She was, absolutely despicable. Incredibly broken champion in the right situations. They are only hitting her durability, and interestingly enough, that's her armor growth. Okay, what does this mean in terms of scaling? Let's check level 6, right? About a 32-ish window, okay? So that's the danger zone, but not something hugely significant. In the mid game, yeah, we're definitely hitting 100 at 11, but it's only against physicals, so I guess marksmen are going to be killing her more easily. If we're assessing Amumu's minus 100 in the mid-game to be real, then Anivia's minus 100 should be real too, but just not quite as real as Amumu's because she's not exposing herself to as much danger to get her output out, right? She doesn't need the durability as much. If you were blind picking Anivia because you just perceived her as that broken, and to be fair, you might not have been that far off, then maybe be a little more careful. An Anivia that is easier to kill is definitely an Anivia that can't control quite as much, but at the end of the day, she's still a siege breaker, and if nobody can just completely abuse her in lane, she will still get all of her control value. Annie was a funny champion. Last patch, I said she got some hugely significant buffs across multiple strengths, which is a style of buff that tends to really impact power. The E change was huge. The passive change was huge, especially for support. What I did not imagine would happen is that she would just straight up become a dominant meta mid laner and support. I thought Annie support before was so bad that it's this is a great change. Now I have a funny off meta strat to play. But no, it's just really good. So Annie is outstanding. And she also got a hotfix nerf on the last patch, which affected her shield mana cost and the AP ratio. It only trimmed the fat. I didn't make a prediction. Her win rate was still really good in the end. They are now nerfing the retaliation magic damage, especially at higher ranks. It's minus 25, and people were maxing the second in some matchups, and I certainly was, especially on support Annie, so I could be an enchanter, 3 points Q into Emax. Tibbers cooldown going up, Tibbers is so dominant, but I don't think we really care. This is significant, and this is just on its own minus 35 base health, which, approaching our 40 threshold to die to burst champions, and we're struggling to trade some more. And it's okay, Annie, you definitely are not retaliating against trades as hard. You are definitely not just she was so unreasonably tanky. This is another situation where we have a champion with just completely unreasonable power levels who is receiving a nerf to multiple aspects, and multiple aspect nerfs are usually significant, including a major durability change. So it's just this. And does this make her easier to kill? Well, short range, yes. It does expose her to some long-ranged matchups that would be hard to play. In mid lane, this remains to be seen what the impact is in support, especially if more melee supports are coming into the meta. So if you jumped on the Annie train, chill out a little bit, just reassess draft conditions, make sure you have real draft conditions for the champion rather than just picking her because she's overpowered, and you should be fine because I have a hard time believing that she's completely doomed from this, right? Aphelios is getting an increase to his bonus attack speed, the W level up. You can now get an extra 1.5% attack speed per level. Aphelios' problem isn't and never has been his damage. He does a lot of damage. And there's a reason we've started trending more towards lethality builds. It's because when you're on, like, heavy attack speed stuff, Crescendum is heavily devalued, and then, like, what's in your rotation, right? Like, are you really playing off of DPS Gravitum? Like, the best combo when you're building attack speed, when you're building a Phantom Dancer, would be stuff like Severum Infernum. Like, that classic teamfight combo. Before we started the one that sets up your whole, like, Severum Crescendum into Calibrum Crescendum into, like that standard rotation, right? Aphelios thrives when the range of the game is shorter. The range of the game has not been very short lately. Aphelios thrives when he's getting engaged on. The engaged supports have been really weak. I don't necessarily think that Aphelios' current state is a symptom of his own power. I think it's a symptom of the meta around him. Now, his solo queue win rate's trash, and it's because he's low agency, unless you're, like, really, really, really good at him, and you can just make your own plays and start face tanking stuff because you've done some insane gun combos, right? But his solo queue win rate is not a fluke, because we can argue that he is a control champ, a control team fight sort of thing. We can argue that he's, like, purely a defensive reactive anchor, unless you're really good at him. And we could argue that that style of champion is always unfavorable in low-level amateur. So while I think the meta might be trending in a favorable direction for Aphelios, like, he's still not a fantastic champion to play in terms of how Platinum works, in terms of how IBS works, in terms of how Gold works, unless you are just an extreme Aphelios main. Azir. Okay. This is an absolutely huge set of changes, and we've got to be careful, right? Minus 100 base mana, but plus 15 mana growth. Soldier recharge time is up by 1 second early. This is a spell that Azir wants a lot of access to. Shifting Sands magic damage up by 40 at high ranks with a plus 15% AP ratio increase. Emperor's Divide, damage up at all ranks by 25, and a plus 15% AP ratio increase. So these are not 100% nerfs. In fact, burst builds are stronger. And in fact, there was another change that was on Twitter that didn't end up making it to the patch notes. So there was going to be a nerf to Azir's 3 soldier damage that did not make it through. So Azir is getting some good damage buffs with some burst spells, at the cost of early mana. Oh, wait a minute, yeah, thanks for catching it. Plus 25 at level 1, plus 75, plus 125. Ooh, yeah, okay, plus 125. I mean, by level 16, I guess that's not that intense, but then coupled with a 15% AP ratio buff. So they're trying to make Luden's Azir more appealing. They're trying to make big burst damage Azir more appealing. But it's coming at the cost of minus 100 base mana on a champion for whom it's worth attacking his mana pool. Azir already does struggle to play out his early sequences if his mana pool is attacked in any way. You can literally spend your time as a jungler ganking Azir solely to make him E away and ruin his lane. So yeah, here's the deal. If you are a player who is capable of executing a Azir combo and you're allowed to fully scale, Champ is arguably better. Arguably. In that state, he is actually just stronger and deals more damage. But I am seriously concerned about his ability to play out an early lane phase. This is so scary with that mana pool. Granted, in Platinum and below, champions scale inappropriately sometimes. Right? Champions can scale inappropriately. So you kind of have to figure out, like, I guess, to what degree you want to disrespect your opponent. But I guess we just assess, right? Like, we just try to make him work if you have an Azir player. Don't breathe in his direction if you're not an Azir player. Do not breathe in his direction if you're not an Azir player. Do not bother with this. So they're saying Cho'Gath on tank builds is struggling because tank itemization is weird and awkward. But what they've done is they've made AP Cho'Gath a monster again. Feral Scream, mana cost down significantly at high ranks. Q, mana cost at all ranks down, so 80 carry Cho'Gath, like bot lane AP Cho'Gath is, he can play out his weakest sequences a lot more easily. It's genuinely a good pick. Plus 20 base damage at higher ranks here. Okay, so this is good for tank Cho'Gath, who has matchups in which he wants to level Q first, right? Like, everything they do to buff tank Cho'Gath, AP Cho'Gath just gets hit, like not hit negatively. AP Cho'Gath gets impacted positively again, especially with, you know, like some extra durability here. Is this going to make a significant difference in tank Cho'Gath pick conditions? My prediction is no. I don't think tank Cho'Gath is particularly compelling, as a top laner especially. Tank itemization just has not been kind to him, although he does have access to IVG if you find a good spot for him, and then, you know, he's a reasonably okay champion. I do think AP Cho'Gath is, like, genuinely sleeper OP, and you should investigate it as a bot laner or a mid laner. Especially, like, I genuinely, I'm really, really starting to wonder if his weakest early sequence in bot lane, is just too consistent to punish reliably now. And I know that sounds ridiculous, and I know it sounds stupid to have played enough of bot lane Cho'Gath to know this. I would genuinely look into it. Elise is picked very, very commonly in pro play right now. And she became a much better... I didn't know this until recently. She became a much better jungler in the new season because she's actually capable of clearing her camps that she struggled on before. That's threatening. 10, 15, 20, 25, 30... burst damage on her Q, right? Which, as a burst champion, 30, 35, okay, we have to consider that. Spiderling, the magic damage on each is going down like +2, +1, nothing, +1. Here's where I must reveal my ignorance and where I cannot be very helpful to you guys. A 30 base damage, or a 30 damage nerf on a burst champion is about the range where, you know, we start to consider that might matter. Like, 40 is the one early game where we think, yeah, that matters a lot. 30 is like, we're getting there, it matters for sure. Was Elise overkilling you? Was Elise just overkilling? Like, I mean, she's always ganking. She's always primed to play in 2v1s. She is never primed to take a fair fight. I don't know if that actually matters as much for Elise as it matters for a laning burst champion. Because I don't know for sure if Elise deals excessive damage in that context, I cannot completely predict the outcome of this. I would predict, with what I know right now, that this doesn't make a significant difference for Elise, specifically Elise. And so I do encourage you, at least until I may be proven wrong, to keep running your Elises if that's in your pool. Jarvan, speaking of me being wrong, I posted a comment underneath my own patch note rundown last week, or last patch. I was just wrong about how to approach ratios like this on durability steroids. This was a really, 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 really big deal. Where I failed to assess the impact of this was, like, my personal experience with Jarvan had always been on, like, full tank, very low econ builds. Donate everything to my laners, sacrifice my resources to get my laners ahead, just be, like, that kind of low impact, or, sorry, not low income, high impact champion, like, the lowest econ jungler in the game. That is not, in reality, how the standard Jarvan is played. He is actually gaining quite a lot of resources in the context of solo queue, because he's just really consistent at snowballing. So what ended up happening is, by losing a second on his W and by gaining, like, a tremendous ratio on this, Jarvan just became way more capable of actually fighting you and way more capable of snowballing into much higher values on this than I had predicted. Right? So they're trying to tone it back a little bit. Just so we understand where exactly this is toned back, effectively, he's keeping his base armor increase, he's keeping his new ratio, his shield duration is still reduced because it's fatter, but how often does this realistically come into play when you're fighting somebody? Not very much. And the cooldown is going back up to its original value. That cooldown change was quite a lot bigger than I predicted. So because my predictors are a little bit wrong about how cooldowns on shields and ratios on shields, like, impact a champion, I'm not gonna take a firm stance on this one, But my expectation is that it's going to feel more like a love tap than like a complete revert of everything. He still keeps his durability. He keeps his new ratio. He's still a competent snowballer. It's just like maybe a couple early game situations. At the very least, I'm not going to stop picking him, and I don't think you should either. Jax is too strong in lane phase, they say. Jax's burst is pretty ridiculous. And yeah, Jax is just kind of... My top laners have been complaining. My top laners have absolutely been complaining about him. So what do they do? Minus 20 base health, rounding on his health growth. Okay, 20, is that a significant change? It's below our threshold because we're treating health as the same as burst damage. We're fine. Dodging attacks now increases the entire damage of the spell, no longer just the base damage. Okay, what's the rest of the context? Minimum magic damage. The AP ratio was reduced. The maximum magic damage, well, because it affects everything, is now increased. So they're saying to Zhonya's Jax, you actually have to dodge stuff to full burst someone. That's reasonable. But the high roll, the best case, is stronger on Zhonya's Jax. Passive on-hit damage is down by 20 early game. Completely reasonable, completely good. This was a contributing factor to his ridiculous like burst, because I guess it's like you can get 2 of these off very quickly, right? When you're actually using your ultimate. Bonus armor for first champion hit down by 10 at early ranks, back up to the same at 16. Bonus magic resist, it's halved at early ranks. Realistically, what's the impact? Lower no commitment burst damage. So Jax has lost, like, okay, we're going to be generous and say 2 in a combo, right? Jax is losing like 60-ish burst damage in a combo, assuming he has Zhonya's. 40 if he doesn't. That's a burst damage change. But it's on a DPS champ who has other output. Going up in the best case. This is negligible until you factor in this. And it's like, okay, a 10 resistance change is a big deal, right? 10 resistance is a lot, especially at early ranks. We'll use a simple predictor from this and we won't overthink it. This is a nerf to multiple aspects. This is a within threshold nerf to burst damage. This is definitely a within threshold nerf to durability at specifically 6 with your ult active. This is the type of nerf where we're like, because it's 2 aspects, because it's 2 reasonable aspects, because it's 2 laning aspects in top lane, the champion is just more honest now. That's pretty much the impact of this. Jax is just more honest with what he's doing in lane. You know, we've all seen Jax win some just stupid things. He's not going to be winning as many stupid things anymore. That's fine. His late game is completely untouched. His snowball state is, like, reasonably untouched. You know, it doesn't take very long for a top laner to get to 11. So is he just, like, the most oppressive carry in the game anymore? No, not really. But can we still blind pick him is the question. That I can't answer. When a champion is no longer capable of just doing stupid things, then their draft conditions matter. The old Jax, I think, was a response class champion. The new Jax, I haven't gotten around to figuring out like 100% whether he's completely counterpick only. Because he has received a meaningful nerf to his early laning, like in multiple aspects, then he will lose some power, like a decent chunk of power. I am 100% confident that this will impact his power in a meaningful way. I am not 100% confident that it restores him to counterpick only status. Oh, we're buffing Malphite again. Look, okay, so if Malphite's an IVG user, and a good one at that, then he's not as impacted as by the weird, like, state of top lane tank itemization as some of the others. Of course, IVG is, like, best case only, and sometimes you're stuck in an awkward situation, like against a magical matchup, but Malphite's not the type of champion you blind pick anyway. He's a counter-develop. We are buffing Malphite's W cooldown at all ranks by 2. We are increasing the empowered attack physical damage by 5% armor. We are increasing the cone physical damage by 5% armor. He doesn't need this. He's a strategic pick. He's a pick that If the game looks good for Malphite, you have won the game. Every time Malphite receives a change, we get a little bit concerned that he can function in his non-optimal matchups. In 1223, Malphite got a big E buff. The base damage was increased by 30. The armor ratio was increased again on this one. Awesome. I said percent armor damage buffs are scary ratios to grant. Malphite did not need extra damage buffs and should be straight up overwhelming as a counter pick. That's what I said on 1223 with this change. Now he's getting more of those ratios and more access to his W against melees, right? On 1219, you know, Malphite's been in the patch notes a lot lately. He got AP ratio increases. The cleave AP ratio on W, the R AP ratio. Now I wasn't super stoked on this one. I didn't think it would meaningfully affect him. I'd be like, okay, is it because his Everfrost rush into less positive matchups has gained more value here? It hasn't, because Everfrost isn't particularly strong. But, you know, this is still a concern, right? Granite Shield on 1216. Oh, the cooldown of his passive was reduced. Oh, the cooldown of Thunderclap was reduced there. What did I say about that on 1216? Significant defensive buffs. WCT decreased by 2 seconds of maxed second. No change in cripple-reliant matchups, sure. But, like, you know, this also empowers your W passive because you have access to Granite Shield, right? Malphite has been in the patch notes an unnecessary amount of times. This champion, on previous buffs, I predicted to be just absolutely game-winning, overwhelming, overpowered in those states. Obviously, his win rate is never going to reflect that, because if you just pick Malphite, he doesn't win, right? If you just pick him in generic matchups, that's not where you find success with Malphite. I genuinely believe, especially in Platinum and below, especially in IBS, Malphite might just be blatantly overpowered. Okay, Maokai. Maokai is way too strong right now, incredibly frustrating with his sapling bombs, which are meant to be zoning and vision tools, not damage ones. AP tree is a compelling build, but there's no risk to crafting a glass cannon when no one ever comes near it. True. The sapling cooldown nerfs will hit tank Maokai, and he seems balanced at the moment, so we're compensation buffing Bramble Smash. Yeah, I agree. Tank Malphite is not completely overwhelming. I've been picking him. The last set of nerfs that he got, we predicted no impact, because the demonic nerfs were predicted to be underwhelming, and the Maokai damage buffs themselves were predicted to be underwhelming, and so they didn't really translate to anything at the end of the day. Tank Malphite was indirectly hit by Radiant, which makes sense. Let's see if this actually hits Maokai this time. E cooldown up. Yep, that's big. That's big. 4 seconds on a cooldown. You want to be just spamming absolutely. Setup takes quite a lot longer now to get like fully online, right? Okay, a -5 base damage, pretty irrelevant. A -10% AP ratio, but the damage is still doubled, so it's like realistically a -10 and a -20. 10 base, don't care. 20% AP, do care. Brush empowered sapling slow. The slow is going up 1 per 100% bonus health, 1 plus 1%. Okay, so the AP slow is quite a lot stronger. The health slow, not really any change in that. We're realistically just looking at this like 20% AP damage change, and is that alone enough? Yeah, I mean, it's a poke champion. We view him from the lens of a poke champion. Tiny damage nerfs impact poke champions a lot. This is a 20% ratio. Now, the compensation buffs that Maokai is getting are, it is eventually an increase of 1% per maximum health. I mean, it's not a 1% DPS nerf, because Maokai can realistically get this to like 3 seconds, 4 seconds, like 3 seconds, like approaching 2? It's not that unreasonable on tank builds, with like haste heavy tank builds. So we definitely don't get within the realm of 1% max health DPS increase. So it's not the sort of thing where we think, whoa, Maokai's so much stronger. Yeah, because ultimately he gets hit by this, even on tank builds, because he's less capable of setting up and getting vision utility and stuff. I struggle to imagine that this on tank builds compensates for this, and this feels bad. So what does he still have in his output? Q damage is reasonable, E is a lot more gated than it used to be, R is still a very powerful initiation tool from the flank, still a very powerful defensive tool, like, still very powerful for pressuring around objectives, and like that's a tool that like Zac and Sejuani don't have, Amumu doesn't have. For the sake of Platinum play, okay? For the sake of Platinum, where aggression wins games, I do not believe that Maokai is your best choice anymore. I actually do think this makes too much of a difference. Because he was oppressive by virtue of his control tools in an elo that favors aggression, and that's kind of shocking. Now he's losing those control tools. Orianna received a suite of buffs that we predicted would be high impact. When did those come out? 13.1b? Yeah, 13.1b. A diverse collection of buffs is a style that usually increases power to a meaningful degree. Now, Orianna got some slightly increased or cleaned up wave clear, which requires fewer Ws. The W mana cost was increased, which could affect support Orianna a little more, is my expectation. Plus 50, plus 10% AP damage on R, major burst increase. But at the end of the day, what some mage players concluded is that she's still a burst mage in a meta that doesn't favor burst mages, and they just didn't really want to pick her up again. But 3 base armor is a big deal. That is an increase of 18 effective HP against physicals at early levels. At level 6, that is an increase of 30, which is slightly below our threshold. It's like right on the cusp of this matters. Alright, so an on-the-cusp durability change and a quality of life mana increase, which like slightly increases your ability to get out of lane, like slightly improves your sequences. It's fine, but nothing to write home about. So if on the last set of changes you didn't assess Orianna to be worth picking, you won't assess her to be worth picking now. Riven's passive, Runic Blade, now grants her 30 to 60% AD, gaining 1.75% bonus AD per level, making her more threatening at without hitting breakpoints, especially in the early lane. Runic Blade bonus damage is now applied to towers, but only deals 50% of the increased damage. Riven can now see that. Okay, so what a weird champ. Last time I checked in on Riven, I thought she was in a pretty good state. Riven players are actually fine with playing her. The only reason you don't see her as much is because tank-heavy games can occur and she struggles in those, and because the level of time that it takes to practice her for pro play is not really worth it for just a generically good champion. And she also can be pretty volatile. You really need to perform, right? But it doesn't mean she's a bad champ. I do think she got impacted by Gore Drinker changes. I do think she definitely got impacted by fighter itemization changes, although I guess, I wouldn't be surprised to discover an Eclipse style going around on her. Oh, well, sure enough, there we go. There it is. I was right. What I'm getting at when I say this is I don't think little changes like this are anything more than quality of life for Riven players. They're like, nice, I can do more in the side lane if I'm winning my lane. Sweet. I have more options. I can make more decisions around the map. Nobody was picking Riven who wasn't going to pick Riven regardless. It doesn't change pick conditions. It doesn't change the fact that you're never going to pick her unless you have a Riven 1 trick on your team. And it doesn't change the fact that she's already a reasonably good champion. Samira is a champion that just wins solo queue games. She wins a lot of solo queue games. It takes one misstep. She's a one bad day champion. The type that I described in my Platinum video. That performs really well at that elo, right? Instead of 3.5% move speed per stack, it's now going 1, 2, 3, 4%. That's big. That's going to make it harder for Samira to run you down and snowball on you early into the game. Inferno Trigger is not life-stealing as much. I am a bit of a Samira hater, but I want to preface this by saying it's based on some theory stuff. Samira in draft theory is not an easy champion to pick, but Samira in practical low elo, is really goddamn strong, to the point that, I think people are more capable of blind picking her than I think. I know somebody blind picked her against us, and reported that it was working. And what that means is that divide between how amateur works and my own biases against this champion make it really hard for me to assess this fairly. I do think this is a big deal in early lane, and I would predict that it's I still personally wouldn't want to pick Samira unless I'm certain it's a spot where you're vulnerable to Samira. But you may feel, based on your experiences that you've had on your team, that this is not going to hinder your ability to kill people making a lot of mistakes. To theoretical Samira, this is a real, meaningful nerf because it's a real meaningful nerf to theoretical Samira, I care about it. I don't necessarily think that you guys have to care about it as much as I do, because I may be wrong for caring about it as much as I do. Neil is really broken. Neil is really good in Samira spots. Oh, excuse me. Oh, boy. Oh, okay. So for those of you wondering where Senna was in the marksman meta, like the marksman support, well, let's just say here she is. We have established in the past that attack speed ratio buffs are some of the most insane changes you can give to a DPS champion. We have seen in Senna in particular, this dramatically changes her power and unlocks so much build diversity. So, like, Senna, from her release state, now has double the attack speed ratio. The last time we saw a ratio increase, Kraken Senna went insane. I can't overstate how insane this is. This is a big buff to carry Senna builds. It also means we have to reassess Senna itemization principles, because this is a champ with very unique itemization and very complex itemization. Historically, I am a hater of attaching Noon Quiver items to Spectral Sickles. I think it's really bad. And historically, Senna has not been amazing with it either, unless she's actively fasting and playing in coordinated environments where she is securing some CS in addition to having Spectral Sickle. The reason I hated it was because Kraken does realistically nothing for Senna until it's completed, where the attack speed ratio is in a state where it's like just good enough to be pretty solid once it's done, but it's not like buying an attack speed component is good for Senna at all. That might change. And there's been a slight rise of Blade of the Ruined King Senna. I had a silver friend who's like, yeah, I'm playing with Bork Senna, and I thought that sounded stupid, and then I realized I had no way of refuting the argument he gave me. It was conceptually sound, as dumb as that sounded. There could genuinely be some proper support Blade of the Ruined King rushes. And it now becomes compelling against Eclipse. Quick Blade, yeah, so now what do we do? Like, we have this attack speed ratio that seriously impacts her power, and we haven't even talked about Dawning Shadow yet, which is gaining, like, a meaningful increase to its AD ratio on the damage. You have to hit the center. It's still challenging. And a really good buff to its cooldown, and you like having these cooldown buffs when you're playing utility Senna, too. Like, you love having greater access to your Dawning Shadow when you're trying to play, like, barrier tank Senna and standing in your front line. You love having access to this on Locket builds. You love having this on, like, Umbral Redemption builds. Like, you love having this on carry builds. Like, it's just a good spell to have higher uptime on. We will check Kraken. We will check Eclipse. We will check Bork. We will check Umbral Locket. We'll check the utility builds again to see if Dawning Shadow makes an impact. We will check IE Rush. We will check Quick Blades Rush. We will check Farming Senna. Is there anything we can do with Farming Senna now? Is it actually able to impact the waves more effectively? Does she have greater early wave control without going My money's on no, but it's worth checking out. Senna will maintain her problem of, like, being noticeably squishier than some other champions because she did only really get half of the durability update, but, like, when you're allowed to play her, like, when she's getting her items, when she's not getting perma all-in, I'm nervous. A Senna with a ton of options means there's a lot of avenues for Senna to be really, really good. Senna also likes it when the meta gets shorter ranged in general. She's not a hob user. She's not able to, like, just walk up and full trade with any other ranged champion. When there are some more vulnerable melees, shorter ranged melees, she likes it, even though she's a bit susceptible to all-in. I don't know. Point is, humongous change. Huge change. Hugely significant, again, because it's a spell you do like having access to, like, permanently, and it does unlock some playmaking if you know how to build her. And we will have to factor in the support item adjustments into this, and we will have to factor in her durability problems, but, again, Senna having this many ridiculous, like, Senna has so many options to check that it is very, very likely, with a buff this huge, that one of them becomes very strong. Death Sentence, plus 20 damage at high ranks. The cooldown's down by 3 seconds. Still reduces cooldown by 3. It could be a hook every 6 seconds once you're actually in combat. That's a pretty significant increase to his CC output. Dark Passage, the early W, you know, it's not minus 1.5 seconds per rank, it's just 1. And it settles on a higher number and it starts at a lower number. And the base shield strength is not as intense when you're leveling it. Okay. And then he's also gaining plus 20 base damage on Flay. Later, he's gaining plus 10% AP. Okay. Thresh has appeared in the patch notes enough times that it is worth considering if he's actually back. As we discussed last time, the big problem with Thresh is that he realistically just didn't have enough lane impact to survive a lane. He really could not skirmish with you, but like he just had virtually no damage to justify his existence, especially when his own CC is very unreliable, especially when his own CC is very weak against ranged champions. But not only is the meta potentially, this remains to be seen, shifting back towards melees, but let's just tally up his damage buffs. He's gotten plus 20 on Death Sentence this patch, rank 5. Plus 20, rank 5, Flay on this patch. He got plus 20, rank 5, last patch. He got an AP ratio increased, right? He got, on 12/18, plus 40 base damage, rank 5, plus 10 here, right? He got another plus 20 on Death Sentence. He got a cooldown reduction here. It's now an even greater cooldown reduction. Like, so, look, this was going from Thresh with no haste throwing out a hook every 9 seconds to Thresh throwing one out every 6 seconds. With no haste, by the way. No haste. He didn't get everything in the durability update because of his shield scaling. Or his soul, like, armor stuff, remember. But he did get this buff in anticipation of that. When we tally up all of the buffs that he's received since he got put into this terrible, terrible, terrible state, that is a lot of damage. A lot of damage. With the meta trending towards the champions that he's good into, I am now... I can't believe it's time to say this. Thresh is back. I am now 100% confident in saying Thresh is back. Remember, melee supports were always prevalent in Platinum and below play, regardless of what the meta was at the top. Udyr. Okay, so they are now reasonably confident that Wildling Claw and Wingborn Storm are equally powerful. And honestly, I would agree. Has Prowler's Udyr died a horrible, horrible death? It hasn't! It hasn't! Look at that! It really hasn't! Even despite all of that, Prowler's Udyr has not died a horrible, horrible death. This effectively leaves Udyr with a lot of cool options. I thought the increased attack speed was expected to benefit Trinity builds in the conditions that Bear Udyr is okay. Phoenix was going to lose some DPS, but Udyr is more than durable enough to play for longer DS or DPS. Predictors did not imply his last set of changes were major. He was still an excellent, excellent champion. So this is realistically just a love tap to specifically empowered Phoenix slow. This is a small nerf to Udyr's Q damage, and as a DPS champion in the conditions where Q max Udyr is good, doesn't really matter. This doesn't even realistically hit what Prowler's Udyr was good at. It's just a Trinity thing, right? This is concerning. Udyr is a champion who cares very, 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 very much about his durability, because that's what unlocks all of his damage. He has to be in the middle of people for a long time. So where does Udyr settle? 75 at 6. 75 effective HP at 6. 140 at 11. Unrealistic 18. That's a 300 effective HP change. We don't assess any of these changes to matter too much. We do assess this change to matter. The question becomes, is Udyr strong enough that we don't care? He is a pretty great champion. He is a pretty excellent, very strong champion. There is a universe in which this just means that Udyr has to power farm harder, but that also means he loses impact on his lanes, and losing impact on your lanes in IBS Gold Platinum, big deal. Big deal. The practical takeaway might be that if he's not unreasonably tanky, he's too much of a control champion to really work in this tier. So I guess we just anticipate the worst, where he does become noticeably weaker in low-level amateur. and hope for the best and just see how we feel about him when we actually get our hands on him in this state. Okay, Veigar sucks. Good lord, this champion. Why does Veigar suck? All of his systems are bad, and burst mages are not favored in the systems that are good. Veigar sucks. It's just... Okay, so Everfrost got severely nerfed, right? That was Veigar's core for a reason. He doesn't need more damage. He needs to set up his utility. Tenacity was really strong. It reduced the value, like, when tandem with Everfrost and his cage, it was harder for him to set up his combos, right? Seraphs was introduced. It's harder for Veigar to burst out his direct lane opponent now. Rod of Ages is very common. It's harder for Veigar to burst out his direct lane opponent. What else sucks? Predator, his best keystone. Predator is garbage. Really awful. So Veigar is just having a very hard time. Now, really interesting what they're doing with this, though. They're range buffs. He doesn't have to expose himself to as much danger to farm up. He's now more capable of playing for poke. Range buffs have high potential to be hugely power impacting by enabling better farming, skirmishing, teamfight, laning. Like, realistically, a range buff can impact everything you do. You know, his cage warps fights enough that even when he's bad, low levels of play still do lose to him at times. That's a really good call out too. Does the W range increase also require less setup then? If you're playing for max range W, do you need less CC duration to set up your W? If that's true, then Everfrost being weak kind of doesn't matter for Veigar anymore. So, poorly supported as a champion, in a meta that doesn't favor him, but with some potentially decent options at a level of play that, like, empowers him, we might get to stop saying outright that Veigar sucks. Viego. I definitely do think he should be building a lot more as a carry. I have been a Sunderer hater for a long time now on Viego. It turns out they agree. The passive damage from Q on basic attacks can now crit. That is specifically a buff to Kraken Viego. The AD ratio on Heartbreaker, it's now plus 2% per 100 bonus AD of targets missing health. So they're trying to increase Viego's damage, they're trying to increase his own capability as a carry, and they're trying to decrease the pressure he puts on his teammates. What's the problem right now? Well, Viego is a champion that you really have to build your entire comp around. He's a monarch for single target blow-off comps. You will draft Viego and you will make a single target blow-off comp. But burst mages are not in favor right now, right? And we had a lot. Viego is also very weak in the ranged support meta because he's not getting the lockdown supports that he actually plays nicely with. So the meta, like, Viego's damage on its own was, like, okay if you were building him in a greedier way, but then, like, he started encountering some difficulty in getting picked. And yes, we did see him picked outside of the context of single target blow-off, but that was really only, like, LCK stuff where he's picked for his early game, and then it's, like, LCK Elise, same thing, and I never liked it. Okay, no, here's the actual conclusion, though. Here's the actual conclusion. Since this is pretty much like Viego's most significant output as a champion, and it was the nerf that killed him, like losing damage on this, getting some back is a big deal. Having a support meta that might favor him a little more is a big deal. And having people more incentivized to build him in a way that makes sense for the state of his kit is a big deal. But I still don't think Viego is exceptional after all of this. The good news is that he's playable. If you have a team that likes to play the single target blow up style, I think the good news is that he's playable. Demonic Embrace has been making champions too fast in the jungle and making power farmers who use this much better than power farmers who don't. Ozakana's Gaze is now capped at 40 damage per second against monsters. Okay. Remember, in Platinum and below, we don't care about clear speed. We really don't. We do not. We don't care at all. So, if you're playing a strong champion who's a demonic rusher, whatever. We don't care. If you're playing a power farmer who's not a demonic rusher, it does actually favor you, but still, we don't care. Like, it's not going to change anything for this level of play. Doran's shield's getting nerfed. I guess it's just the base health regen. No, that definitely matters, but it's such a small number on such a widely used system that, like, the ripple effects are going to take some time to assess. And my immediate concerns would be ranged tops slightly better, like Gnar buff, cannon buff sort of thing. Akali slightly weaker, Silas slightly weaker, like it might slightly encourage mages a little more. I I would expect that in Platinum and below, that slightly is so irrelevant. But I wouldn't be surprised if this spurred some change in higher levels, like actual pro. We're just gonna need some practical experience to assess that, right? Now, here is the big thing. The moment you guys have all been waiting for. You guys were patient, and I appreciate it. This is the big discussion, the long discussion that we were about to have. Support item adjustments. Ranged supports are factually much better than melee supports. That has been true since the durability update. We talked about this last week with our intention on melee supports there. We also mentioned that in Platinum and below, the melee supports were still getting picked regardless because they are just good for that level of play. They're good for the style that gets played in that level. The intention is to nerf ranged supports and buff melee supports. Very explicitly, that's the intention. Base health regen of Relic Shield is going up 25%, Targon's Buckler up 25%, and tier 3, like, not affected whatsoever. It's still 100. Same with Steel Shoulder Guards, Rune Steel Spalders, and Pauldrons of White Rock are not here, they're not affected. Just tier 2. Spectral Sickle and Spell Thief's Edge, there are 2 sets of nerfs here. On both of them, the charge generation time is going up by 2 seconds. You used to be able to get all 3 procs of Spell Thieves every wave on paper, as long as you were trading at the beginning of the wave. It is no longer possible to do that every single wave. This is intended to hit the Hail of Blades marksman supports more than everything else, because those were the champions that were most consistently doing that. Those were the champions who were getting, like, shocking 6-minute flips, like 6:30, 7-minute flips. What are the implications of getting your gold slower? Your snowball is not quite as good, and most importantly, your Sightstone is less likely to come online by 10. The appeal of Spell Thieves over the melee items, like Relic and Shoulder Guards, was that you had a higher likelihood of generating a snowball at a slightly higher risk of not getting it. The Shoulder Guards and the Relic Shield, rock solid, consistent, like 9 or 10 minute flips. Frostfang was also, like, these things were also fully flipping by 14, 15 in, like, best cases, which is ridiculous because the pace you're hoping to be on is 20. Ranged supports are getting their wards a little bit slower. The implication of that, remember the buffs to trinket wards? Well, the counterplay to that was to develop an earlier sweeper on your support to actually continue ganking bot lane sooner. This slightly disincentivizes that. If your Sightstone is coming online later, then having an earlier sweeper can feel a little bit bad. I think it's ultimately, like, not a major change, it's just something to think about. On top of that, Spell Thieves itself is losing the ludicrous mana regeneration it had before. It is now matching the values of Spectral Sickle at 25, 50, 100. This is going to require us to reassess our mage support mythics a little bit. I just released a long series on TikTok about mage support itemization. One of the big things that I pushed at the beginning was that on most Luden's users, Mandate was just better, universally. Part of the reasoning for that was that the flat mana is not a relevant factor. Lost Chapter is a very weak component on supports. It will remain a weak component on supports. But part of the reason that flat mana wasn't valued is because you just got everything you needed and more from your Shard of True Ice. It was really overwhelming. The intention with this change is that ranged supports will have fewer tools to attack the health bars of melee supports, because they will run faster. They will not have as many spells in a sequence. Simultaneously, the melee supports are gaining some health regeneration to withstand this. When you look at that, that sounds damning. But let's not overreact just yet. First, let's see who the big winners are. Oh, we found our winner. Braum is the biggest winner from the changes here. Braum has the highest base health regen, so he benefits the most, with one of the highest growth coefficients in the game, so he's getting a lot of regen. Keep in mind, Braum just received a major buff to his W resistances. Braum received a cooldown buff on his Q. It's actually sounding like Braum is going to be a staple of this meta coming up if things play out as expected. Braum is going to be really good into melees. Like, really good into melees. And he's not going to be quite as weak as his, into his ranged matchups. If this ends up going his way, right? Now let's look for some other melee supports. Amumu has an outstanding base health regen. Alistar has a high value. Leona has a high value. When are we starting to get kind of low? I guess even Galio has a decent value. Zac support has like a decent value. When are we getting... Are these like standard normal values? Rel is lower. Thresh is lower. They still benefit. We need to really look at the practical impact of this. So, does the base health regen on these supports, on these melee supports, make it much harder to get them out of lane? If so, like that compounded with the mana thing, does this heavily impact the ability of certain mage supports to play out a laning sequence to success? Are some of our mage supports going to have to better rely on their scaling? Are they less capable of bullying? Personally, I do not believe that this charge generation time is going to be really significant in the grand scheme of things. It just cuts our marksman support abuse cases. Is that going to make Varus support go away fully? Kalista support go away fully? Ashe support go away fully? I do not expect that to be the case. I don't think so. Don't think they fully go away. But this is a factor that's worth considering. Their value, some of their value is like all laning, right? Ashe isn't just laning value. Senna isn't just laning value. Even Kalista at this point isn't just laning value. She's ranged Tom Kench, we can consider her. Melee supports are still going to have some of the issues where, like, some of the low damage, low sustain ones, like Leona, still may struggle to actually fully initiate, right? I don't think Leona's going to recover fully from the durability update on herself. Nautilus is already in a pretty okay state based on just his own utility. Rel is in an okay state because her itemization is good. Yeah, that's the thing. No, Nautilus was a meta call. I don't think Nautilus was broken. Nautilus was just the best meta call they had. And again, I also want to emphasize that, like, this is really just a laning thing, okay? Because it's a laning thing, if you're expected to get out of lane, even if you had problems in your mid game thanks to the durability update, those aren't gone. They're not gone. That's why I was criticizing Leona still, right? It's why Rel was brought up as, like, an okay one, because, she can engage, and she can, sustain herself on, like, Mikhail's Qmax builds. We will need to come together and help to answer these questions. This does look very compelling in terms of making melee supports more capable of laning, which means the ones that can have post-durability update mid-game impact, because they're capable of snowballing, should be okay. There are a few very obvious conclusions to draw. This correctly targets the Halo Blades marksman supports that we're abusing it the most. It won't fully kill them. This correctly restores some of the laning power of melee supports. It won't solve some of their mid-game issues, which is fine, right? It will solve mid-game issues if and only if the laning increase becomes reasonable enough that they are very consistently snowballing on some of these ranged champions. Then, they just have a more farmed, more fed carry behind them. This is where things get a little harder to predict, because it's in tandem with this. We just have to check our mage supports, our enchantress supports, struggling to actually play out a lane phase, or a sequence in lane phase, to success. Remember, on 12-14, the increased dragon health, the increased dragon value, it made mages very appealing, and, if this is very harmful to our ability to play out an early lane phase, we might actually find ourselves with some slightly deprioritized dragons in the early game. But it's hard to know for sure. So please, we've gone over good champions who profit from this. We've gone over who will be hit the most by this. We've gone over some concerns we have with this. Like, we've ticked all the boxes. We've asked all the questions. Now we need to just figure out how extreme it is. We need to figure out together how extreme this is. It won't be possible to assess the power level of, like, any support, really. I'm going to have to make a new tier list from scratch based on what we discover from here. So we've got to see what's an overreaction, what's an underreaction. like how much our melee supports actually helped, how much our ranged supports actually hurt. But if you have a game coming up, on 13-4 and you just need to make a prediction, right? You can't go wrong with some melees in Platinum and below. You really can't. So if it's in your pool and it's what you're comfortable on, go for it. If you are, I sincerely doubt in Platinum that you're abusing marksman supports and stuff and that you're playing a ton of mages. If it's what you're comfortable on, just make it work. You need some time to pivot and adapt to these changes. I don't see the harm in overreacting a little bit to some engaged supports when you're playing in Platinum and below for your first week of assessing the patch. Because worst case scenario, you're playing a gimped champion that still performs much better than expected in your elo. Is there anything else we need to care about? Okay, some little things here. It's a Yumi nerf! This only nerfs Yumi! Nobody else sold these! And then we just have a little treasure hunter change where you're gaining 100 gold less than usual, so it's less of a snowballing rate. It's far and away one of the best runes to pick up in your secondary rune tree for almost all champions, currently contributing to a lot of early snowballing. Okay, not in theoretical play. Domination tree is garbage in theoretical play. You only take it for sudden impact on magicals. You can have it for like relentless or ultimate hunter, and then you just like throw a zombie ward or something on there. Cheap shot's fine. I didn't take this. You were probably taking this. I'm not a fan. I like the inspiration econ cheats a lot better. This is up to you. I have no opinion because I have no experience, because it's not my playstyle, because I don't use this. I don't value it. Which means it was probably better in amateur play than I gave it credit for. See, we're seeing the pattern with my opinions, right? Like, okay, what's going on? Jungle adjustments. Oh, jeez. Oh, no, come. Okay. Rift Herald. No soft reset anymore, but longer leash range. Cool. Just get used to playing around that. Gromp, base health. He's too durable. We're pulling down his durability tab, which will scale his late game durability by even more, so Gromp is easier to kill, so laners might find it easier to kill a Gromp again. Cool. It's also going to make you faster. Okay. Sustain. Early sustain in the jungle could use a helping hand. This is multiplied by up to 2.2 times based on missing HP, which will help many times in clear. So 25 to 30. Okay, actually, I was getting really low on my Jarvan clears. Awesome. This is... We'll check in with some unhealthy clearers. We'll check Aurelion Sol in the jungle. Although he just got hotfixed. Lost some of his monster Stardust scaling. Right. Okay, cool. So some clear health is going to be better. And remember, clear health in Platinum only matters if it would prohibit you from visiting a lane or like impacting something earlier. So it could have impact. And it could actually give you like more level 2 ganks on Jarvan or something. Clear speed. AP junglers have a very generous ratio on their companion's damage. Now that the meta is dominated by these champions, it seems the ratio is too generous. Demonic Embrace, after the changes to jungle HP scaling in preseason, made it the preeminent jungle clear item, put a lot of pressure on tank bruiser junglers to purchase. And so I guess that was keeping Graves down a little bit, right? So it's going from a 15% AP to a 12% AP. Yeah, that's going to be such a marginal change for most players that we don't even have to talk about it. Kill experience is going down at... Okay, at specifically like 3, 4, 5, 6. It is specifically going down to like 30% of a level rather than like 45, 50 something until it's back up at level 10. So there's like a small part of lane phase where you're not getting as many dominant XP leads. So top laners in particular may find windows where they are actually harmed by killing their opponents. Top laners in particular might have to worry about this a little bit. Because they just get a small gold cash out in an awkward wave state and like... Okay, so be careful as a top laner that you're killing your opponent at the right time. Outside of that, Control comp's better in theoretical play by a small amount. No relevance for amateur, except top lane. Combat kill experience. Kills can quickly swing players back into parity for opponents who are substantially ahead from other actions. Comeback mechanics are built up to give you a fighting chance, but these are too intense. Okay, level lead should be a bit stickier. The first level doesn't matter anymore. If you are one level apart and you kill a guy, you're not getting any extra. That's what it means. So, yeah, so that is the patch. There are a lot of power impacting durability changes, which should slightly impact pick conditions for champions, right? There are a lot of laning concerns for champions. Like, that's actually the big thing that's changed. Most of these champions are getting nerfed or buffed for the early game. A lot of laning implications have occurred in this patch. Laning will change for a lot of champions here. And whether that means your pick conditions change or not is ultimately up to you. Like, it is such a laning-oriented patch. Everything is laning. Everything is laning. So just go experience your lanes, I suppose.